Hello, welcome back. So we jumped straight from 3 to 4. If you just arrived here, going what we're jumping into, click channel, click playlist with Bride or Bridal in, and we're in a long series. That's housekeeping done. No other housekeeping to do. Let's crack on. So we're talking about the ketubah. So there's a metaphor and a witness of the whole thing. So we're really going to get deeply into it now. It's not worth labouring in, but there's this whole idea, which we're now going to extrapolate on in some of the following slides as we go through, which unveil the metaphor in it. So this whole idea of Jesus being the Messiah, and the Messiah prophesied in the Old Testament, but actually the entirety of what Jesus is doing, he is replicating a Jewish wedding ceremony, and you can see when he's speaking, and also when in the rest of the New Testament, when John, or I don't think Peter talks about the wedding directly, or so it's Paul and John, when they're talking, they're going back to this idea that Jesus has. And that idea is Jesus knows he's replicating that wedding. And then when he's doing it, he's making that clear. So if you understand what is a ancient Jewish wedding, that's what he's doing. Just be aware of that. So how are we going to get into the weirdness of the metaphor? So the man and the mohar. Now this is actually quite complicated and takes some getting used to. And it takes some getting your head around, because it's basically two things which are given as gifts from the groom or the groom's family to the bride or the bride's family, and then one of them is given back to the bride when she's married and indirectly goes to the husband, and then if the marriage goes wrong, it's then given back to the bride's family, or the bride takes the money with her, so to speak. And it takes some, well, put it like this, I understand this as well as I can understand it, but it still takes some effort to get my head around what's actually going on. That's because of the metaphor. So the point here is with the matter. I'm mixing the letters up. The matar is a mixture of matan and the mohar. So the thing with the matan and the mohar is they're gifts, and they're separate gifts. But why do they just have one gift? Metaphor. They're both gifts, but they're separate gifts, and they're given by the groom to the bride, or the groom's family to the bride's family. One's, we're going to look at this, but it's what we'd understand to be dowry. But it's not a dowry, so if that freaks you out, it's not a dowry. So we're going to explain all this bizarre metaphor. The point here with this slide is, if you're just listening to this going, oh, this is just tradition, actually this is in the Bible. And actually, although it's translated dowry and gift, it's not actually a dowry. It's certainly not as we'd understand it, which is the mohar, and the matan, which is the gift. The words are actually in the original Bible. So the context you can see there, what the context is relation to a guy wanting to marry a young woman. Well, why young woman? A virgin. Someone who's not in a relationship. Someone who's not had sex with another man. So it sounds quite coarse, but if we actually go through it, we understand that it's not coarse. So he's basically saying, give to me this young woman as a wife. But he's not saying that. Ask me ever so much, dowry and gift, and I will give according to what you say to me, but give me the young woman as a wife. So when you understand it, you'll be able to unpack that it's this whole traditional idea of before you even begin to have a relationship with a woman and get married, you actually have to organise all these traditional aspects. You have to go to the house, knock on the door, you have to go through the ketubah, and the ketubah is the let me get this right, the mohar, and you have to give a gift to the bride. If you don't want to do any of that, you're never going to get married. So there's that kind of urgency in that to arrange all this traditional stuff. So if we kind of jump back to this bridal metaphor and the language, see, we're beginning to unpack what is this wedding, and we're beginning to go, but now we've understood this. So this idea of gifts being given, and it's a bridal price, and it's for something. This is the language used in the New Testament to describe what Jesus does on the cross. Because we've already covered in the last video the whole concept of the Bible being God and his people takes Israel as a people, marries his people, they go astray, commit adultery, he divorces them, the Messiah then comes and then picks this idea up again. Again, Jesus is saying all this stuff. He's making it clear he's come to do what he's come to do, and it's in the concept of a wedding. So God again writes out a new ketubah through Jesus' acts on his blood and his body on the cross. Not wanting to be coarse and say blah blah, but because blah blah just means there's a lot of other stuff to that. So it's not blah blah, but you know what I mean. So when we understand everything, we understand that the apostles who wrote the Old New Testament understand this. So let's just look at a few references with the language. This all relates to kind of what we call theology, the idea, the theology of what Jesus had to do on the cross, which we understand. But they understand it in this richer vein and this richer paradigm of wedding. So they use the same language and metaphor that is used for the mohar and the matan. So 1 Corinthians 6:20, let's just go for these, because it's when we understand it, it's lovely. It's the word I'm trying to use. It's like spot on language. Blah de blah. 1 Corinthians 6:20, for you were bought with a price. What price is that? The bridal price. So glorify God in your body. Ephesians 1:7, in him we have redemption through his blood, the forgiveness of sins, in accordance with the riches of God's grace that he lavished on us. That word, so we're looking at the Greek now, lavished, that's abundantly, exceedingly. As we'll see, or have seen, I think we'll see, future tense, the matans, the lavishing gift given from the groom to the bride. 1 Corinthians 7:23, you were bought with a price, do not become slaves of men. So bought, bridal price, with a price, bridal price. A classic one, John 3:15 to 16. For God so loved the world, doesn't matter, that he gave, so the giving her the gifts from him to her, his only son. So this is the gift that God gave, which is the bridal price, his only son, that whoever believes in him should not perish but have eternal life. Revelation 5:9, and they sang a new song, saying, wherever you should take scroll, which open its seals, for you were slain, and by the blood you ransomed people for God, from every tribe and language and people and nation. It's ransomed. So we've seen in one of the where was it again? It's in one of the 4 cups, and one of the 4 I wills God says to Moses at the burning bush is to ransom. So why has he paid this price? Because he wants to ransom us. We all understand what ransom means, but didn't understand in the context of a marriage, which we now understand. Titus 2:14, who gave himself for us to redeem us from all lawlessness and to provide for himself a people for his own possession, more zealous for all good works. So redeem again. Ransom again in Matthew 20:28. Even as the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. That's a quote from Jesus. One ransom again. 1 Tim 2:16. He gave himself as a ransom for all, which is a testimony given at the time. So what testament is that? A testament that Jesus is partaking in a wedding ceremony. 2 Peter 2:1. But false prophets are also arose among the people, just as there will be false teachers among you who will secretly bring in destructive heresies, even denying the master who bought them, bringing upon themselves swift destruction. So Jesus is the master who bought them. He paid the bridal price. Again, is given from him to her. 1 Peter 1:18-19. For you know it was not with perishable things such as silver and gold that you were redeemed from the empty way of life handed down to you from your ancestors, but with the precious blood of Christ, a lamb without blemish or defect. Now, a lavish gift is a gift of silver and gold. So anyway, I hope we're beginning to see some of this language that's used in the New Testament, what it relates directly to. So yeah, it's a cross, but it's more than the cross. It's a cross within ketubah, within a marriage ceremony. So this idea of the weirdness and the mystery and the mystique and the imagery and the metaphor of the matter. So just going to talk about the mohar and divorce a bit. So the mohar and the matan are types of gifts given, again, from the groom or the groom's family to the bride or the bride's family. So particularly issues with this. So this is the issue relating to it not being a dowry, or not as we would see it, as a traditional sense, that just I want a woman, I pay this money. So when we look at the Torah in regards to divorce, which we'll do later, and I put part 4, but this was meant to be part 3, probably part 6 actually, because there's a lot of things we've got to unpack. So critically, the mohar was to protect the bride and her purity against an accusation of adultery, and then was to protect her if she was then divorced without outside the concept of what you're allowed to divorce for, which is adultery. So in the Torah, you're only allowed to be divorced because of adultery. So in this case, the bride takes the mohar. It's the thing in the West we despise, swapping money for a wife. It's the thing in Eastern traditions that protects. Something I just said then that should click something in your brain. That's not quite right. I'll just explain that in a bit in the next slide. So often a woman, once divorced, does not remarry. She's basically out on her own. Has no man to fend for herself. So she takes that mohar with her. Again, something should trigger in your mind. If it hasn't, don't worry, we'll discuss it in the next slide. But that sets her up for life as a divorced woman. So that would then protect her if her husband throws her out of the house, or if we use the biblical term, puts her away. So let's just look at the matan. So it's a gift made to the bride, from the groom to the bride. So these are all biblical concepts we discovered. So matan means a gift. It's from the 3-letter root nathan. To give, put, set. So it's a gift given. Put something in place, it sets something in place, which is to finally be married. So the wedding dowry obviously is a nice hot potato. It's not a dowry. The mohar is not a dowry paid for the bride, it's the purchase price for the marriage for the bride, the church. The mohar is the cross that Christ has purchased for us. So if we don't like this idea of dowry, we accept it is a dowry, which it really isn't. No dowry, no metaphor for the cross, which is why it's important to have that in place. Because if we didn't, the New Testament ketubah and the Old Testament ketubah wouldn't be the same. They'd be different. We couldn't call them a ketubah. So we said something before. So this is the thing. Both gifts are given groom to bride. Okay. The mohar is different. Okay. In that, traditionally speaking, part or whole is given back to the bride by her family, and then it indirectly goes back to the husband. So it's kind of really groom's family given to bride's family, once married, given to bride, and indirectly given to husband because they're now married. So effectively, you could say the husband in that tradition is now in charge of the mohar. That's not wrong to say that, though it's really not quite 100% true. So there are 3 levels of protection for the bride because of that. So if anything goes wrong with the relationship, remember it has to be inside the Torah. That mohar, that money, that bridal price only is kept by the groom in case of adultery. It's certainly not due to error by a groom. So if, for example, the groom throws the bride out, or he makes a false accusation of adultery and it's proved to be a lie, she takes the mohar. So the mohar always stays with the family it's given to, directly or indirectly. The only case that it's not, and the groom gets to keep it, is when the bride commits adultery. And this is what protects her. So this is the thing I said with the whole thing. Yeah.
Can I have a yogurt?
Yeah, you can. Sorry, just got interrupted by my little fella. Thank you, little fella. So, again, both gifts given him to her, indirectly the mohar goes back to him in some way. But if he mistreats her, whatever happens, and if it's not a case of adultery, she gets to keep that money. So even if he says to her, we'll look at this is why we're looking at this later. So the occasion of Mary and Joseph, it's the same. It doesn't say, because it doesn't need to say, but it's the same tradition. So Mary and Joseph are going through the same process. Mary becomes pregnant. What does Joseph naturally want to do? He wants to divorce her. Naturally, he can say she's pregnant, obviously, because she's got a bit of a bump. I'm not the father, so therefore he gets to take the mohar. So rather than push that disgrace on Mary, he just, in effect, becomes the bigger person, the better man, even though he loses in the whole thing. And what's explained in the story, which we don't see in the Western version of the story, is that Mary gets to keep the mohar. It's quite incredible if you think about it. Also, when Jesus is railing against the Pharisees with the woman caught in adultery, there's 2 things that are going on there. So there's that instance, and then there's an instance where he's talking about divorce. If you combine the 2 together, so one in the Torah, the man and the woman who committed adultery in the relationship have. So a man's married to a woman. The woman commits adultery with another man. Who goes up? It's not the woman; it's the woman and the man by Torah. So Jesus is criticizing the Pharisees for not following the Torah. Which is quite interesting, because it's not new versus old. It's you old Pharisee guys following the Torah aren't actually following the Torah. Jesus is discussing this issue of the divorce happening, and then basically, again, it doesn't say that the guy keeping the mohar, even though he hasn't proved an accusation of adultery. So there's all this stuff. And why is it there? To protect the woman in that culture, protect her from a situation that the culture designed for her not to be in. And then Jesus railing against the Pharisees and the traditions because they allow certain things to happen outside the tradition and outside the Torah. So what we understand, and here's the real big thing in the metaphor, so that the metaphor that we're not talking about a marriage, as Paul says, we're talking about the bride of Christ and Jesus' wedding, his marriage, his relationship to the church. So between the first and second comings, between the betrothal and the final stages of the actual wedding ceremony, and the giving and the saying of the vows, which are written down again in the ketubah, is the time of preparation. Now, if you take us as the bride of Christ, this is the situation we're in. So this then gets very rich for us, because this is the stage we're in human history. If the whole idea of the Messiah coming first and then coming back is in a wedding, which it is. So we've already seen the duties of the bride and the groom between partaking of the two cups either side of the stage, and we've looked at the preparation that the bride and the groom go into. So the reality is, and again we've said this, but we need to re-emphasize this, and this is our reality since Jesus died on the cross and went back to heaven. The bride and groom would not see each other. And that time can vary. It's tradition at least a year. So the longest known period of preparation is biblically 7, which is for Jacob. So what we have instead of a relationship, like a face-to-face relationship, is the back and forth messages. So the bride and the groom have a set of witnesses. So this is where the parable of the 10 virgins come in. Those 10 virgins are the bride's witnesses, and they pass messages between each of the bride and the groom, so they can kind of keep their relationship going in some senses. So in our preparation, who does this? It's the Ruach, it's the Holy Spirit. It is given for this purpose between Jesus' first and second coming. So the wine, once the marriage is arranged and the contract drawn up, the bride and groom celebrate by sharing a cup of wine. This celebrates betrothal. So that, again, it's this idea of the 4 cups that we briefly covered in the festival of Passover, or Pesach, I think is the right pronunciation in the Hebrew. So the actual marriage has none of the physical benefits of being married that begins, all the legal loyalty requirements of being married, the obligations. So this is the stage we're in. In the whole ceremony, the next time they share a cup of wine is at the 7th stage. When do we share a cup of wine? In the marriage supper of the Lamb. Funny enough, called the marriage supper of the Lamb, so they got that bit right, so to speak. In fact, they do this, they in fact don't see each other again until the 7th stage. So again, it's worth echoing. This echoes exactly what Jesus states. It exactly echoes our own situation in our own relationship with Jesus, if in fact we are going for a marriage. Actually, some of the point of doing communion is corporately. We celebrate we are betrothed to Jesus as a bride to a groom. We do this regularly, but don't understand it. So we understand the whole concept ketubah-wise, though we wouldn't say that covenant-wise, the blood of Jesus, but we don't understand it in the same vein in terms of marriage or relationship.